and guided by the principle of timely, accurate, and continuous disclosure of information regarding the activities of the company. And then, finally, the new code requires that companies should have a code of ethics and statement of business practices. The code of ethics for directors should contain certain minimum provisions, including their duty to act honestly and other fiduciary duties of a director. The board is given the responsibility of formulating both the code of ethics and the statement of business practices. All directors, management, and employees are required under the code to abide by these codes, while the board has a duty to monitor adherence and ensure that breaches are sanctioned. So, ladies and gentlemen, the new Code of Corporate Governance has covered all subjects every standard code should cover, and surely it is a great improvement on the 2003 code. It is hoped that public companies will abide strictly by its provisions in order to remain competitive in the global marketplace. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Igbeken, for that review of the code, a 42-page document that's also available on CD-ROMs. Now we've come to the very important part of this very event, and that is the panelist discussion, those that will do some review of the code and those imperatives and how it will be implemented in more greater details. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and our audience for listening in on this very important event. So let me once again provide another introduction. We've spent about 50 minutes in this providing the background to this code. Now we want to get into the panel discussions proper. So I'll need to reintroduce once again for the benefits of those of us in the audience and for viewers of this live event, those who are here for the panel. And I would like to start the introduction in no particular order, but I would like to start by introducing the chairman of the drafting committee of the new code, Dr. Mahmoud Abdullahi, SAN-OON. Please, once again, recognition. Thank you very much. Also, very briefly, Dr. Abdullahi will discuss the imperative of the new code for us. And we also have Ms. Benedicta Moloko, who is a member of the board of the Nigeria Deposit Insurance Corporation and a past chairman, Institute of Directors. Ms. Moloko, thank you very much for coming through. Thank you. She will discuss the role of directors in the implementation of the new code. And Dr. Olusegun Osunkaye, the chairman of Nestle Nigeria PLC, OON, will discuss a very important part of this document. You examine the code from the perspective of public companies. And Dr. Olushola Dada MFR, thank you very much for being part of this event so far. We will hear from him the personal perspective on the new code. And of course, we'll have once again Kennedy Igbeken, Director of Legal Services and Secretary to the Board of the SEC. And of course, Ms. Patricia Adedipe from Chevron Technical Pension Fund, the Head of Investment. She will talk to us from the point of institutional investor. And of course, our chief hostess at this event, the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Ms. Aroma Ote. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Now, to flag off this part of the panelist discussion, we would want to invite to make a very brief comment, and that will be the job of the Director General of the SEC, Ms. Aroma Ote.
Thank you. This is an extremely important day for the Nigerian capital markets because, as everyone knows, we started last year articulating why it is important that we build a world-class capital market for our country. First, of course, we have huge needs for capital, but we need to make sure that that capital is efficiently allocated and that we reward the companies or projects that are the highest performing. And we therefore feel that the foundation for building a world-class capital market is actually good corporate governance. And if anybody wasn't convinced before 2007, when the financial crisis started across the world, I know that today that they're convinced. If anybody is not convinced in our country, I'm sure today we're convinced, given some of the peculiar challenges that we've faced. And through history, when you look back on crisis, when you look back on challenges in the capital markets, there's always a contribution that comes from the weakness in corporate governance. This is why, for us at the Securities and Exchange Commission, it is extremely important that we focus as a community on the capital markets on good corporate governance. And I'm pleased that both the chairman of the board of SEC, Dr. Christopher Collade, and the secretary of the commission have outlined what are the elements of a good corporate governance. My aspiration for the Nigerian capital markets is that we have the highest standards. Indeed, that we do what a country like Brazil has done, which is through the Corporate Governance Index, the Novacada, on the Bovespa, the Brazilian Stock Exchange, that we can have companies aspire to measures of corporate governance that are the highest standards in the world. That way we can attract and retain capital, whether it be from local investors or from international investors. This is our aspiration, because capital markets are extremely critical for our country, and without good corporate governance, we will be not laying the foundation on a solid ground. Thank you.
We thank you very much, the Director General of the SEC. And very important, we say this is the Capital Market Anti-Corruption Act. And I think that could just perhaps go to the National Assembly. It's an anti-corruption code for the Nigerian capital market and for public industries in Nigeria. So, for those of you, for those who may perhaps escape the EFCC, there's another code here waiting to catch up with you. So, this is the SEC's Anti-Corruption Act in public companies in Nigeria, and I think it's a very important document. Now we'll need to listen to Dr. Abubakar Mahmood, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, OON, who is the chairman of the drafting of this new code. We'd like to hear from you, Dr. Mahmood. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Chairman of SEC, the Director General, other distinguished board members, and my colleagues on the committee that worked on the 2011 Code of Corporate Governance. The chairman started by praising the work of AB Mahmood Committee. I think I must pass the credit to my colleagues who worked with me on that committee. And I can see there are very many of them here. There are some on the high table, Mrs. Moloku, Dr. Dada, there's Kule there, Tony, Mrs. Otu. I think please stand up to be recognized, including those who are in the audience. Please. I think I was very lucky to be chair of a committee that comprised a very highly set of experience and very patriotic Nigerians who worked very hard. The committee was set up on the 15th of November 2008. And we submitted a report on the 29th, I believe, of March 2009. So we're all very delighted that the fruit of the labor we put in has finally come to fruition. And I would like to especially congratulate the current leadership of the Securities and Exchange Commission for pushing this to the finishing line, so to say. I'm going to speak briefly on the process and then highlight some of the key considerations behind what we came out with. First, the process was a very highly consultative one. We advertised the work of the committee and invited a whole range of stakeholders to make contributions, to submit inputs, and we received quite a bit of that. In addition, we invited experts from various fields because we didn't feel this was just a matter for members of the committee. A whole set of experts in universities, both locally and foreign, as well as highly skilled and experienced corporate administrators, including the keynote speaker, Dr. Kolade, who visited the committee and sat with us for over a fairly long period of time. So the work was really as a result of the synthesis of all this. Aside from that, we looked at the existing models from various countries. What happened in the United Kingdom, in South Africa, United States, and a whole set of other countries, because we felt we needed to take into account the current developments and approach to the subject before crafting our own here, or at least before reviewing the 2003 code. So this, in a nutshell, was part of the process that went into this. Now, what were some of the underlying considerations? Now, believe me, we were very concerned about the state of the Nigerian economy. We felt at the time that the economy was, everybody believes, or everybody accepts that, is not what it should be yet. If you look at the Global Competitiveness Index, Nigeria is number 127 out of the surveyed countries of about 134, 138 countries by the World Economic Forum. At the time we were doing this work, I think we were number 134, something like that. So there's been a marginal improvement. But still, when you consider that Ghana is number 81 in the world, you can see that we are still very far off the mark. And Nigeria has not yet made up the number 10 on the Africa Competitiveness Index. In other words, we're not among the 10 leading competitive economies in Africa. Now, you look at all that in context, our size, our population, the size of the economy, and so on, and you definitely will come to the conclusion that we are not where we should be, especially if we take into account the enormous human resources that we have and the enormous natural resources that our country is blessed with. So this is some of the background we were looking at. And I must say that we were pushed by this zeal to really try to see what sort of best practices we needed to take into account globally in order to push our country to be in the forefront of what the DG wants us to achieve, one of the most efficient economies or capital markets in Africa, and perhaps among the leading competitive markets in the world. You look at the Vision 2020, the very ambitious program that the administration has, and you come to the conclusion that without good corporate governance practices, there's no way our companies will be competitive, and there's no way we can grow the economy. So this was part of the background and the motivation. And the final outcome, of course, is what you saw in the report. I'll just take a little time to highlight some of the tensions, if I may call it that went into our deliberations. First, we started by examining the various codes. And of course, if you look at the codes, you will know that there are two conflicting, so to say, philosophies of the corporation itself. One is the one that views the corporation as primarily existing to serve the interests of shareholders. The other, perhaps, is the one that takes a more liberal view of the corporation, which includes not just servicing the interests of shareholders, but taking into account the interests of other stakeholders. Now, most of the philosophies that underpin the various codes that we've looked at will vary between these two extremes. And we certainly moved to the end of the view that sees the corporation as not just existing to service shareholder interests, but also take into account other stakeholders. And that is part of the philosophy that underpins some of the recommendations. Now, the second point I would like to highlight is the intense debate that went into whether we should have a mandatory code or whether we should have a voluntary code. This wasn't an easy thing to resolve amongst ourselves. Some of our colleagues and some of the experts that appeared before the committee, and indeed the philosophy of the 2003 code, whether we needed to remain in the realm of self-regulation. Voluntary code is what was needed. And there was a very strong argument for that. Now, some of us in the committee also felt, look, the Nigerian corporate environment was not as sophisticated enough to be able to work on the basis of voluntary self-regulation. And there was a need for some catalytic role, if you liked, by regulators. We debated this very keenly. We looked at all the various options and felt that what was needed was something in between. Now, at the time that we were doing this work, a very interesting report came out, a study by the International Finance Corporation of the changes in corporate governance in banks in this country. And one of the